So earlier today we got another UFC 300 announcement from Dana White, and unfortunately it did happen while I was at university quite a few hours ago, so I just wasn't able to make a video as soon as the news dropped. We did hear that we got a BMF title fight between Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway, and then we've also got Jim Miller's fight for UFC 300 against Bobby Green as well. In this video, I'm going to talk about Jim Miller versus Bobby Green in a separate video, which I'll upload as soon as this is finished uploading probably. I'll talk about Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. So let's get into it. Jim Miller, he has his UFC 300 fight. The fans wanted to see him at UFC 300. He himself wanted to be at UFC 300, but he did come out and say that it's not as big of a deal to him as it is to other people for him to be on the card. But Jim Miller, he's made it UFC 300, or at least the fight has been booked, and it's been booked against Bobby Green. And I've got quite a bit to say about this fight because I do like it. I think it's a fantastic fight, but I was going to bring up that these two, I believe, have been scheduled to fight against each other 3 times. They were scheduled to fight against each other in 2021, 2022, and I believe in 2014. So yes, 2014, 2021, and 2022, they have been scheduled to fight each other. It just has not happened. UFC 300, I feel like UFC 300 is going to be the card where it all goes down. So let's talk about this banger, because this is going to be a good fight, man. I look forward to it. Jim Miller, I'm happy to see him on the card. I wanted him to be on the card. I will be honest and 100% transparent. When I first saw the announcement, my genuine first thoughts were, man, I was really excited to see Paul Felder come back. But maybe Paul Felder just doesn't want to do it. And to be honest with you, after he finished doing the commentary for the last UFC card, they had him there in a press conference and he said, there's going to be a lot to think about. I'm going to have to get back in the gym and see if I'm really feeling like it. And I feel like maybe Paul Felder has just told the UFC, hey, I'm just not going to be ready in time. Or I don't really know what's going on with Felder. Maybe he just is on the fence about having a return, which does make sense because when you think about it, fighting is a pretty big deal. So when you decide to step away from fighting and then come back in, if you don't come back in 100%, you could get knocked out, you could get hurt. So I understand why Felder might be quite tentative to take a fight right now. It'll be interesting. Or maybe something else could come up. Maybe there's a matchup that he's thinking of. Like when I think of Paul Felder maybe making a return, I genuinely think of Paul Felder versus Dan Hooker in a rematch. Now, who knows? Who knows? That's personally what I would do, but I'm from New Zealand, and I feel like that's a score that maybe needs to be settled because a lot of people think Felder did win that first fight, but it is what it is. Let's talk about this one here. On one hand, I think that Jim Miller's got a really, really good chance of winning. And on the other hand, I think, man, Bobby Green might knock him out. You know, because at the end of the day, we did just see Bobby Green knock out Grant Dawson. But it is worth noting again, Bobby Green is coming for a really bad KO loss. Like, it was really bad. And it wasn't fun to watch at all. Now, I'm not the biggest Bobby Green fan, but holy shit, I felt sick watching it. Jalen Turner, 6 weeks ago, I guess, at the time of recording the video, about four months in between the fights, I guess it'll be between the next fight. He took a lot of damage in that fight, man. He got knocked down, and the ref just hates Bobby Green, maybe, or maybe he was half asleep, but that was a horrific stoppage. It really could have been stopped with minimal ground and pound, to be honest. Like, I understand Bobby Green was scrambling a bit, but as soon as he ended up totaled up like that, and after one of those shots, I feel like the ref should have said, okay, that's enough. It's just, we see early stoppages all the time. I don't know, maybe some people would call it early if the ref stopped it a bit sooner, but man, like, that was just a bad stoppage. And Bobby Green took a lot of damage, and now he's getting back in there. He's coming back against Jim Miller. Bobby Green has been finished a couple of times before. Now, it's worth noting, not many. You know, he has only been KO'd twice. Sorry, he's been KO'd 5 times and submitted twice. But he's still been knocked out before. He got knocked out recently. He got knocked out by Drew Dover. So he's been KO'd twice. I guess TKO'd by Islam Makhachev as well in the last couple of years. Knocked out Grant Dawson, though, which nobody saw coming. I mean, people probably did, but not me. But Jim Miller, he's been on a bit of a tear recently. You know, he's looking good. I thought he looked really good against Gabriel Benitez. He obviously looked pretty good against Jesse Butler, who just kind of ran forward and just started swinging and got KO'd in 23 seconds. Had a competitive fight with Alexander Hernandez, which was a really fun kind of war sort of battle. Took out Donald Cerrone on Donald Cerrone's way out. Knocked out Nicholas Motta when Nicholas Motta was making his debut. And, you know, that's a win that hasn't aged too badly. Like, I do know that Motta looked really bad against Ogden, but he did just KO the train, Tom Nolan. So yeah, another thing to note as well, if you guys are unfamiliar, Jim Miller has fought at UFC 100 and UFC 200, and I believe he's won by KO in both of those events. No, he didn't. Sorry, he won by decision against Mac Danzig at UFC 100, and then UFC 200 rolls around 7 years later, and he takes out Takanori Gomi by first round KO. And now he's at UFC 300 another 7 years later. This man's been in the UFC for a long time. When was I born? Hold on. How long has Jim Miller been in the UFC? Because I'm not that old. Okay, I was born 3 years before he even made his debut. There's some fighters, I believe, in the UFC that made their debut before I was even born, because I'm 21. But no, okay. Jim Miller made his pro debut in 2005. So he's been around, though. I mean, he's a legend. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I believe he's the oldest. No, he's not. Andrei Arlovski is the oldest fighter on the roster. He's one of the oldest fighters on the roster, though. He's definitely had the most wins. I believe he's had the most fights under the promotion. He must be on a pretty good contract, you know? I mean, like, Andrei Arlovski is making $350,000 just to show up. I would assume Jim Miller has to be making similar money to that, you know? Like, I do understand he's on the prelims of a lot of Apex cards. He's still got to be making a lot of money, though. So, especially for 300 as well, they might even give him extra incentive. It's also worth noting, though, as well, is Bobby Green in the rankings? Hold on, I'm going to have to search this up. Is Bobby Green in the rankings? Because Jim Miller's been on a bit of a run recently, so they might have just gone and done a ranked fight for Jim Miller. He's ranked 14th. Dude, Jim Miller could be in the rankings. If he beats Bobby Green, he might take the number 14 or 15 spot. That would actually be kind of crazy. I feel like we've got I mean, Jim Miller said he wouldn't retire at UFC 300, and I'm going to be honest, he actually doesn't really look like he's slowing down at all. So I would be surprised if we see a retirement, but I wouldn't be too surprised, as it would kind of be ideal, especially if he beats Bobby Green, then he could retire. As for the prediction, though, I didn't really go into it too much. I just kind of talked about how Bobby Green's taken a lot of damage. I feel like Jim Miller has to take this one down to the ground. Like, yes, I know he's got pretty good striking, but I don't think Jim Miller's striking will be good enough to really deal with the awkward boxing style that Bobby Green gives, when he has his hands pretty low, or very low, and he kind of, you know, what's it called when he kind of shuffles his shoulder to just get out of range? I mean, he's got an awkward boxing style. I don't think Jim Miller's striking, especially at this point, is going to be good enough to deal with it. But at the end of the day, Jim Miller is not really known for his striking. He's definitely more of a grappler. Most of his wins come by submission. A lot of Bobby Green's losses, sorry, only 2 losses have come by submission. I lied. I think if Jim Miller's winning, it's going to be by submission. Otherwise, it could be by KO. I'm seeing people thinking that Bobby Green's chin is gone. But at the end of the day, the 2 guys that knocked him out, Drew Dober and Jalen Turner, very powerful guys at 155, and that was a motivated Drew Dober as well. We know that when Drew Dober fights certain fighters, his motivation just goes up quite a bit, and I think Bobby Green was a fighter that he didn't quite like the look of, so he went a little bit crazy, and that's why he got the KO. I don't know about Jim Miller, though. I think Jim Miller might win. It's a 50-50. I'm actually going to lean with Bobby Green. I actually am picking Bobby Green. I think Bobby Green beats Jim Miller, to be honest. It sucks to say. I really want to see Jim Miller get a win. If Jim Miller fought Paul Felder, I probably would have picked Jim Miller just because Felder's coming out of retirement. You know, you just don't know what he's like. I feel like if Jim Miller fought Matt Brown, I would have picked Jim Miller by submission. If Jim Miller fought Joe Lozon was the name I was thinking of, I would have picked Jim Miller. Bobby Green's a tough fight. It makes sense, and the reason why it does make sense is I think Jim Miller versus Bobby Green is a bigger fight than Bobby Green versus Paul Felder. Like, I know the fans would love Paul Felder, but I feel like a lot more casual fans are keen to watch Bobby Green. I feel like maybe more hardcore fans would be keen to watch Bobby Green's fight as well. I just know personally I would rather the Paul Felder fight, but I don't know. Maybe we see Paul Felder do something else. I saw Alex Bahunian say Paul Felder versus Matt Brown at UFC 300. In my opinion, that fight's not good enough to put on UFC 300. No disrespect to those guys, but this is the fight. This is the card that Dana White has been put on record for saying that we would look at the prelims of this card and think they are not prelims. And even though this would be a prelim on most pay-per-views, it's Jim Miller, so you let him get away with it. But the Cody Brundage fight, I think, is a bit... like, what's going on? Anyway, another thing I wanted to bring up that just, I think, has gone over... hasn't been officially announced yet, but Tapology has UFC 301 in Brazil. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I don't know how accurate this is. Apparently, Paul Craig and Caio Borralho have verbally agreed to fight against each other in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. If UFC 301 is in Brazil, Pantoja will be on this card, and Alex Bahia will be on this card. So that means that the main event for UFC 300 is probably Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad. But Chael said that Bilal hasn't been confirmed. So what is it then, Chael? Is it Leon Edwards versus someone else? Like, because what's the thing? What's going on? Anyway, that's kind of it for the video. At the end of this one, 10 minutes. This is a long video. I did want to bring up a little bit of another section of Artem's book club because I'm reading books at the moment. At the moment, I'm reading the third book in the Dune series by Frank Herbert. I don't know if you guys haven't read Dune. If you haven't read the original Dune by Frank Herbert, I really would recommend it. It's the best book I've ever read. The second book in the series was fantastic as well. I'm now on the third, and I do have the fourth, fifth, and sixth books in my cupboard, so I'm kind of getting through it. I'm maybe about a third of the way through the book, Children of Dune. So far, it's not as good as the first two books for me, but the second book, I really didn't really like it until the end, and then the ending made the book so much better. So I'm hoping the ending of this one could be quite interesting. I know something weird happens, but I'm not going to spoil the book. It hasn't even happened yet in the book. I just know that it happened. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.